What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 7th, 2017, getting into the week here. And, boy, we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A lot of stuff going on right now. Today, the corporate media is obsessed with Obamacare, which is an important issue, I grant you, considering what an absolute flustercluck that was coming in from the very, very beginning. But what they're doing is they're focusing on this because there are other things going on they do not want you paying attention to. And we are seeing an example here where there's a Facebook page for a group called One American News Network that is coming out with the story that former White House staffers and officials are coming forward to say that they were ordered by Obama to find some way to work against the incoming Trump administration to just leave stuff there that was going to cause him problems. And, of course, we know a lot of the staff holdovers are now the source of these leaks that are getting out from inside the White House. So it's getting very, very ugly, and it's deliberate. It is absolutely deliberate. Now, getting on to Obamagate, that is still growing like crazy, and former Obama Secret Service agent Dan Bongino is saying this scandal is going to blow wide open this week, even as the corporate media is still trying to make this all go away. And here is the bizarreness of it all. When Watergate happened and the entire government apparatus were trying to keep a lid on it, the Washington Post was out there trying to make America, aware of what was going on, how corrupt the Nixon re-election had been. And today, of course, we've got the Washington Post is at the forefront of saying there's nothing there. It's all just complete nonsense. What a tinfoil hat-wearing bunch of kooks you all are to even dream that, Obama would wiretap Trump to help Hillary Clinton. Now, obviously, a lot of people continue to draw parallels between what's going on today and Watergate itself. Article came out of PatriotRising.com, Watergate Redux, and they're also pointing out the oddity that the Washington Post had been at the forefront with Woodward and Bernstein bringing this scandal out, All the President's Men, and it was a great book and a great movie about what was going on. And today the Washington Post is just as obedient and subservient to the status quo, possibly because of the change of ownership here. Now, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kelly, is out there saying that, Trump must have convincing wiretap proof. And then he goes on to say he wouldn't guess why the Obama administration might have wiretapped a 2016 presidential candidate. And somewhere in the halls of the White House, the ghost of Richard Nixon is saying, well, you can figure it out for yourself. It's amazing here. Now, here is where the story gets ugly, and you have to really pay attention to the timeline as to what was going on. We know that originally Obama tried to get the FBI to bug Donald Trump, and the FBI said, no, that's too Watergate for our tastes. Obama then went to the FISA court and asked for a warrant that included the name of Donald Trump. And even the FISA court, which rubber stamps 99.8% of all warrant requests, said, no, this is too Watergate for us. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Shortly after, 3 days after that first FISA court warrant to wiretap Donald Trump was denied, a fake Trump website was set up, TrumpEmail.com, and they were copying the Trump Organization brand, and it looked like it was part of the Trump campaign. And it was run by a lady named Emily McMullen, who turns out to be the sister of the ex-CIA never-Trumper, Even McMullen. And what was posted on this website was cited in the second request for the FISA wiretapping warrant. That, oh, see, here's proof of the link between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and it was all manufactured fake. Now, story coming out of a YouTube video we posted, CIA analyst, Trump wiretap was probably done via British GCHQ, and that would not be unusual at all, because for illegal eavesdropping, the U.S. often goes through foreign intelligence services to evade U.S. laws, so they can stand there and say, we're not doing it. We have no idea how this intelligence showed up, but it wasn't us. Trust us. And this little practice goes back to the mid-1980s as part of the program called Echelon, which was the forerunner of all this mass surveillance, and the U.S. made a partnership with 4 other countries, and it was called Five Eyes or Echelon. We even have some of the Echelon intercept stations here on the island of Oahu. And the deal was each nation would spy on the citizens of each other, which was perfectly legal. Then they would trade the intel with each other. So these intelligence agencies would get intelligence information on their own citizens, despite the laws that say you're not allowed to do that. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Newt Gingrich is weighing in on this Obamacare issue, and he's making a very, very good point, because he's talking about how General Flynn and his conversation with the Russian ambassador that drove him to have to resign was recorded in the Trump Tower. So who leaked that to the Washington Post? Because there are very strict laws that say when there are these wiretaps going on, that the information must be kept confidential. It can't just be given to the media. It certainly can't be given to Donald Trump's rival in the election, which appears to have happened as well. And Newt Gingrich is just making a good point here, because if the taps on Trump, Flynn, and Sessions were legal, there'd be a paper trail. If there's no paper trail, heads should roll. And here's where it gets murky, because when Sessions was being spied on, he was still a senator. He wasn't yet being considered for Attorney General. And when the spying started on Flynn, he was still technically a private citizen. So this is getting murkier and murkier. Now, Trey Gowdy, as you know, in his position on the Intelligence Committee, is saying we're going to look into this, and he is slamming the media for trying to rush to judgment to say there's nothing there and it's nonsense, and basically saying, with all due respect to the corporate media, we can't cross-examine anonymous sources. We can't even directly examine the anonymous sources. It's very easy to write a news piece compared to conducting an investigation. And he's basically telling the corporate media, stop speculating, stop spinning, let us do our jobs. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike.
Aloha.
Mike, there was a caller yesterday, I think his name was Rick from Arizona. He had said that this whole Obamagate, it could be a distraction. And you sort of gave it short shrift.
Yeah, I did.
What I want to say is, I don't think it's a distraction. I think it's a serious event. But do you think? I mean, you've talked about this a lot in the past about a limited hangout. With this story, will the public, will the government, the media, even the independent media, ignore Hillary's alleged selling of classified state secrets for money?
Well, not around here that we're not going to do that. You know, in fact, if anything, I mean, this, I think, is convincing more and more people that the Democratic establishment was, in fact, crooked enough to commit treason against our own country. And I'm certainly going to keep pushing on that issue.
Yeah, but is this a limited hangout where we're going to see these phony hearings, nothing's going to come out of it, no one's going to go to jail? I mean, whatever, regardless of what Steve Bannon says about Obama and his aides going to jail, I'll bet you a rusty nickel that this government collapses before Obama and his aides go to jail.
Well, in terms of the long-term benefit to the nation and the American people, either outcome is good for me. I mean, the government could completely collapse from this. We're in Soviet-style, pre-collapse mode right now. And, of course, if there's a change of government, look what happened in the Russian republics. Once the government had changed, researchers were free to start writing books at all the terrible things that had been done under Stalin, and all of that would come out. So even if the U.S. government collapses, it's not going to make any of this history go away. In fact, if anything, it's going to create the freedom to talk about it and a definite market need for these things.
Mike, I hope the government, this central government, does collapse. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but these people are so evil and so corrupt. That's the only solution, and that would be the best thing that would happen to this country and the world as a whole, in terms of world peace as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
You've got guys like Lindsey Graham came out and said, oh, there's no evidence of wiretapping against Trump. So, I mean, this is becoming increasingly evident that he, McCain, and many others are being blackmailed and controlled by the intelligence service.
Well, I think everybody's being blackmailed by everybody. I mean, there's no law that says you can only be blackmailed by one person. Certainly with the NSA total surveillance, we know they were even spying on Barack Obama when he was in the Senate. So people are probably trying to juggle blackmailers and saying, well, I'm being blackmailed by NSA, I'm being blackmailed by organized crime, I'm being blackmailed by Israel, and I have to sort of find a balance between them.
Right. You know, I'll just say this. There was an interesting interview with Robert David Steele on Richie Allen, and he had said, he said Obama probably didn't order this, because in his opinion, Obama is just a puppet of the deep state.
I would tend to disagree on that. In fact, we're hearing more and more people come out from inside the Obama White House saying that, yes, all of this went through Obama and he was giving out the orders. And the good news right now, as we pointed out yesterday, the paper trail for all of this is no longer under control of Obama and his people. It's under the control of the Trump administration. So they will be working to prove the records, to preserve the records, rather, and we're seeing a story coming out of Red State Watcher that apparently the White House is now hiring a major legal team in preparation for prosecution of everybody involved in this illegal spying.
Well, I hope we do see real prosecutions, because I hope it's not a case of, like, again, phony hearings like we saw in Iran-Contra, and you had mentioned this many times with Senator Daniel Inouye. Whenever something really serious came up, like the CIA drug smuggling, he'd say classified, and he'd close the doors. So
well, let me put it to you this way. Let me put it to you this way. Any way that brings down these criminals will be fine with me, and we can only prosecute them so many times. And if they decide they're going to hide Hillary spying, but they still throw her in jail for something else, I'll be perfectly happy with that.
Oh, I agree. No, I agree with you. I just hope we get prosecutions.
I want to see prosecutions. I want to see tarrings and featherings. I want to see, burnings at the stake. I want to see,
I'm with you.
All right, okay?
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, Mark Levin, and you need to remember Mark Levin was the former chief of staff for Ronald Reagan's Attorney General, Edwin Meese, and he's not exactly a fan of Donald Trump, but he is out there at the forefront of saying that this is just shameful to learn that President Obama was wiretapping Trump Tower just before the 2016 presidential election. And basically he's saying Trump is absolutely right. This is a new Watergate, and we're not going to let go of this. And basically comes on and says, we're talking about the activities of a police state. And he's not the only one out there saying it. This is third world banana republic, Soviet-style politics, and we just lost our connection to Republic Broadcasting. So let's see what's happening. All righty, so Dick Morris is now out there wading into this situation and saying that there is no question because Obama sought to spy on Donald Trump just 1 month after he won the nomination, before the claim that Russia was aiding Trump even occurred to anybody. And so they were spying on Donald Trump to help Hillary Clinton. They got the FISA warrant after the fact to try and retroactively make it seem like it was legal. And let me do that. Yeah, we're all still good here. I don't know what happened to RBN, but they're off here. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. Now, we're seeing another story here from thelastgreatstand.com indicating that Harry Reid and Hillary Clinton likely knew about the Trump wiretaps. And here is where it gets very, very interesting because what's going on is we know that Hillary was tweeting messages that seemed to indicate she had been informed of the wiretaps. As I mentioned before, there are very strict laws regarding this surveillance, that you are just not supposed to be sharing that information. Certainly the idea that the Obama administration was sharing this intelligence with Donald Trump's political enemies is what puts it into a whole new Watergate circumstance. Story coming out of TheRealNews.com, Empire in decay, federal government falling apart as spying allegations fly. And basically, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson says that he too has heard the intelligence community ask the British to spy on Trump on behalf of the Democratic Party. And when you have the politicalization of the intelligence agencies, it is a symptom of a dying empire. Now, the Senate is still trying to gin up hearings to investigate the link between Donald Trump and Russia. And their star witness is this former British spy who came up with this now discredited dossier claiming that Trump and a couple of prostitutes vandalized the bed in the presidential suite at the Moscow Hotel. And it's been completely discredited, but he's going to be the star witness of these Senate hearings. And the Democrats are trying very, very hard to put one of their own in charge of this investigation. That's why they put pressure on Attorney General Jeff Sessions to recuse himself in order to get a so-called independent counsel who's actually going to be working for them and will allow the wildest basis, speculation, rumor, and innuendo and hearsay to be entered as factual evidence against Donald Trump. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as a matter of fact, now the BAM user feed is being messed with. I'm getting all these disconnect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect. Can you smell the fear in the air? That's certainly how I see it. When you're catching flack, you know you are over the target, and all of this childish behavior is telling us we're on to something major here. So again, anytime you see any of these stories about how President Obama was spying on Donald Trump to help the Hillary Clinton campaign, the new Watergate, the sequel, Revenge of the Audio Tapes, or whatever they're going to call the movie. Forward it to all your social media. Flood it out there. We can do this. Remember when the story about phony Tony Blair's dodgy dossier first broke in to the light? And the corporate media just looked the other way. No, absolutely not. We know nothing about, or the Downing Street memo is actually the one I'm thinking about, where they admitted we're fixing the propaganda around the agenda of war in Iraq. And the corporate media didn't want to touch it. And we flooded it all over the Internet to the point where everybody was calling up the corporate media and saying, look, this is all over the place here. Why aren't you reporting it? And the corporate media said, oh, all right, we'll report on how they lied you into the war in Iraq. God, people don't know what's wrong with you. So we can do it. So, Rivero's Rangers, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab hold of these stories that are all over the web and forward them to your social media. And you may have to look for them. I already checked yesterday. If you go to Google and Google Obamagate or Obama spying on Donald Trump, Google is putting all the denials right up at the top of the search list. So you might as well forget Google, complete waste of time. Go to Yandex, go to DuckDuckGo, go to any of those others that are not using the Google engine, because Google is out there trying to say, oh no, there's nothing there, please don't pay no attention to that mind behind the curtain. Now, the other big story that is being ignored with as much dignity as the corporate media can stand, WikiLeaks finally let loose on what they call the Vault 7 release, and it is monumental. It is a document dump from inside the Central Intelligence Agency about all the different ways they spy on us, mess with our lives, cause all kinds of problems. Dump of their hacking tools, policies, and all of it. And the cyber weapons include malware that targets Windows, Android, iOS, OS X, and Linux computers, as well as routers. They target the routers. Some of the software was developed in-house, but apparently Great Britain's MI5 is said to have helped build a spyware attack for Samsung TVs. If you have a Samsung television, the CIA can go on in and listen to you through the built-in microphone. Spokesperson for the CIA wouldn't comment. We don't comment about such things here. And, of course, the spokesperson for the UK Home Office is unable to comment. And basically, WikiLeaks is saying that apparently they have a new source inside CIA, a new Edward Snowden, who is still thankfully anonymous, saying basically the reason for the leak is because the CIA has clearly overstepped its legal mandate. It certainly has overstepped the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. So the CIA is targeting your iPhone, your Android, maybe that's why Claire's Android phone is such a piece of crud, and smart TVs. They're getting into absolute everything. Now, WikiLeaks was going to have a press conference about this yesterday. They got hacked. Their live streaming feed got hacked. And they've basically dumped all this data out onto the net in all these files that anybody can find them. They're all over the place where you can download and go through them. And here are some of the really juicy tidbits you need to pay attention to. The CIA has a group called the Remote Devices Branch. They have a group called Umbrage that is tasked with collecting a library of hackerware stolen from other states, including the Russian Federation. And the purpose they have this malware is to carry out malware attacks on computers and frame a third party. And they have a collection of keyloggers, password collection, webcam capture, data destruction, persistence, privilege escalation, stealth, antivirus avoidance, and survey techniques from around the world. So what we have here is the CIA has evolved the capability of using stolen hacking tools from Russia to commit hacks to be framed on Russia, which brings us back to a story that came on out last July. This was over in the Huffington Post, where the people who were investigating the supposed Russian hack of the Democratic servers were saying, there is so much evidence here. You know, it's almost like they wanted us to know they were Russians. No, they wanted you to think they were Russians. Sort of reminds me of that movie, The Orient Express, where the detective Hercule Poirot is saying, there are too many clues in this room. It's a setup. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network here. We're talking about, well, we've been talking about Obama spying on Donald Trump, apparently to assist Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now we're talking about the WikiLeaks data dump, where there's been a huge release of the CIA's hacking tools and their policies, including the revelation that the CIA has a library of stolen Russian hacking tools with which they can hack into computers and make it look like the Russians did it. Remember when the Department of Homeland Security was caught trying to hack into voter databases this last election? Maybe they were trying to do that. It's a frame-up. It is a frame-up. Now, do you remember when that first accusation where the DNC said the Russians are hacking our servers, the Russians are hacking our servers, and the DNC refused to give the FBI access to the servers and instead said, we're going to have a private consultant verify this is Russia. And the consultant turned out to be tied to an organization that is openly promoting conflict with Russia. It doesn't get more obvious a frame-up job than that. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, didn't they also discover that their treasure trove of cyber weapons had been up for sale on the dark web there for a while?
Yeah, that was the other embarrassment a while back. I don't know if it was CIA or NSA got hacked into, and their cyber weapons were made available to criminal hackers all over the world. And
you know, that was depicted. Oh, I'm sorry. That was depicted in the TV show Person of Interest before it happened. That show was crazy, man. It had code words that William Benny released, and talked about before Snowden released it and stuff like that. It was a little freaky because I would see stuff in that plot line for that show, and then it would happen.
What?
But the same code words would show up in the alternative media. And the Dirty Tricks campaign, obviously, with this kind of stuff, has been going on for a long time. I was asked to produce some videos back in the late 1990s for a group called Take Back Kentucky and Concerned Citizens for Kentucky. And our little TV studio here, the phone problems were very interesting. And it revealed that they were listening in on people's phones way before the Patriot Act, when they thought their phones were turned off, flipped, closed in a purse or in a leather belt pouch and stuff like that. I was able to send one guy 3 voicemail messages of him and some buddies driving down the road to work, and they were talking about stuff. And that's how I could make him believe what I was saying was true, because you could talk to reporters and they wouldn't even talk to you about it, or
the reporters all work for the other side. The reporters are all part of, basically the U.S. government has privatized the Ministry of Propaganda, and it's now called CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, PBS, NPR, and the rest of it. Their business is not to report on the truth or even listen to the truth. I learned that firsthand all the way back when I accidentally got started on this path over the murder of Vince Foster, where I'd found in the FBI's own documents clear evidence of fraud manufacturing the testimony of Lisa Foster. And I took it to people I knew in the local network control centers for the news, and they said, no, we can't touch that. We already know about it. We can't touch it. It'll be our job. And I
had access to the free to post files. I didn't realize it, but I would send video of car crashes or fires or something to an ABC and an NBC affiliate in a nearby city, and I didn't realize all I had to do was hit the up arrow on the folder, and I could see all of the affiliates across the country for ABC and NBC in the FTP files. I posted a video of one of these phone calls locking up our fax line here at the studio in 2009. Hundreds of times, because I went back and checked, and if it was deleted on a file, I would put it again in there again in production folders and news folders. The next summer.
Well, hang on. We're running tight on time because we lost almost a half hour of our show in the first hour.
Yeah.
We know these dirty tricks are going on, and all of it goes all the way back to the mid-1980s with this program called Echelon or Five Eyes. And it was basically a system set up by the United States and 4 other countries to spy on each other's citizens and then trade the information to evade privacy laws in their own country. So they've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. And, of course, now we're finding out from this WikiLeaks dump, the ability to spy on you is literally built in to all of your computers, your tablets, your smartphones, your big screen TV. It's all out there. Anyway, Mike, I got to let you go. I want to get on back here to the news. And before we get further on that, as long as we're talking about Democratic National Committee computer consultants, has anybody seen Brian Pagliano lately? Supposedly there's a congressional warrant out for him that he has refused to respond to a summons to testify on what's going on there. So he may be, decomposing over in Fort Marcy Park or something like that. Oh, and by the way, another really revealing aspect of the WikiLeaks dump on the CIA is how many antivirus software packages are backdoored by the CIA, including ClamAV, Norton, Kaspersky, I was a little upset about that one, Avira, Zone Alarm, Rising, Dart, F-Secure, Zamana Anti-Logger, Emmet, Malwarebytes, Bitdefender, Panda Security, Trend Micro, ESET, and Avast. They're all backdoored by the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because inside this WikiLeaks document dump, it is reported that the CIA has developed a system that allows them to take over remote control of car control systems. If your car is equipped with automatic parking or anything like that, it can be taken over and used to assassinate you. Remember what happened when Michael Hastings was killed, and he'd gone to friends and he said, the FBI is investigating me and I'm scared. And he was on this huge, huge story. And he died when his Mercedes apparently just took off 150 miles an hour down the street and then swerved into a tree. And the corporate media said, oh, reckless driving, had to be drunk, had to be on drugs. Nothing suspicious here, people. Go back to working, breeding as soldiers, and paying your taxes here. Now, getting on back to the backdoors and the antivirus and all the rest of that, this WikiLeaks CIA data dump has confirmed the government has intentionally created vulnerabilities in all of your systems and intentionally leaves them open. In other words, out of their paranoia that the American people might not like them, the government has required manufacturers to put backdoors in all of your products, backdoors that sooner or later are found by the cyber criminals and the ransomware writers, especially since the NSA hacking toolkit got stolen and put out on the dark web. But to them, you're being a victim of ransomware and having your business files stolen is a small price to pay for national security. They've left us all wide open. And apparently the UK Independent is saying that, yes, the CIA itself has lost control of its own arsenal. A range of software and exploits that have leaked out into the outside world. Now, I have an idea about that. This makes the NSA and the CIA and the U.S. government policy accessories to all the ransomware attacks. They facilitated them. It's time for a class action lawsuit by anybody who's ever had to pay ransomware against the NSA and the CIA to recover that money. Because if it hadn't been for the NSA and CIA putting in these deliberate weak points, penetrating your computer's defenses, the cyber criminals would not be able to do what they're doing. You just think about that one. This is like the government coming around and drilling out the locks on your front door so they can come in whenever they want, and then sooner or later the burglars say, hey, the lock doesn't work on this door. Let's go on in and help ourselves to the TV. No, you don't want that TV. The CIA listens to you through it. Remember Pablo Escobar, the world's top drug lord? According to his own son, Pablo Escobar worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA is a major league drug crime syndicate. We saw part of it back in Arkansas, again in the 1980s, when the CIA was manufacturing untraceable military weapons and smuggling them down to Nicaragua in violation of the Boland Amendment and the Logan Act. And they were funding it all with literally tons of cocaine brought into the United States and sold to your children. Now, by virtue of my first wife, I actually got to meet Freeway Ricky Ross out in Southern California. He figured in Gary Webb's series of stories, Dark Alliance. And Freeway Ricky Ross just openly bragged he worked for the CIA. And as long as he worked for the CIA, selling their cocaine, the LAPD would never touch him. And they never did. That is the scale of corruption that we are seeing at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Another story, this one out of Russia today. Leaked FBI document reveals secret policy of targeting journalists and their sources. Does this sound like a republic with civil protections on your privacy and freedom of speech? Or are we seeing the face of a dictatorship finally revealed? Remember what I said on that coffee mug years ago? The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and that is what is going on now. And the corruption is just rampant. Might be the easiest task to simply try and count all those people in the federal government who are not corrupt. 1, 2, anybody? Bueller, apparently not. Remember John Podesta, Hillary's campaign manager? And they're out there screaming, Donald Trump is working with the Russians. Podesta got $170,000 from Russia to end U.S. sanctions on a Russian bank. This is according to the Daily Caller. It's like everybody's doing it, but we're going to scream that Donald Trump is the bad guy because they all hate Donald Trump. They hate the fact that we, the American people, have actually chosen a president who's not of their little clique, their little country club, their little secret society with their strange initiation rites. WikiLeaks has also let out another document showing there is absolutely no question Hillary Rodham Clinton knew the consulate in Benghazi needed protection. So that disaster all sits on her head. All right. We're coming up here on a commercial break, and we're back on our regular broadcast schedule. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's campaign against the pedophiles, which also, like the WikiLeaks and Obamagate, is being totally ignored by the corporate media. We also have a phone call waiting. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news, we're going to take a phone call from Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
We live in interesting times, Mike.
Oh, boy, talk about an understatement.
Well, let me make 4 real quick points that I want to remind everybody here. One is that all this, the CIA losing control of all their hacking instruments also gives them plausible deniability. That's one thing. The CIA, remember when they bugged a couple of years back on the torture report, when they bugged their own Senate Intelligence Committee, when they bugged them and nothing happened, was the Dianne Feinstein?
Yeah, I remember that.
Like Bernie Madoff bugging the SEC. Nothing ever happened. Nobody ever heard anything about that, right? Really. How about Israel guaranteeing Jane Harman that she could have the intelligence chairmanship of the House?
Especially after she was caught passing secrets to Israel, as I recall.
That's right. That's right. And then there's the Michael Hastings murder, which happened. I heard that, actually. I heard the explosion. It's like Highland and Melrose. I'm right around there.
Ouch.
But remember that, the taking over the cars thing and Michael Hastings. Plus, if they can do that with cars, Mike, they can certainly do it with automatic pilots in any aircraft. So it's the same thing.
Well, hold on that one. The reason it works on the cars is because the car systems have not been designed to be secure, and the controls that move the steering wheel, accelerator, and brake are not isolated from the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell phone connections that come in these high-end cars, which makes me glad I'm driving a 17-year-old Honda. So, but as far as autopilots on aircraft, they are isolated away from like the cabin Wi-Fi and everything, and so I don't think it would be as easy to take over an autopilot. Now, there was a theory a while back that remote control systems in airplanes were being considered, but pilots certainly did not like them. As a matter of fact, do you remember Dov Zakheim? He was comptroller of the Pentagon when all that money went missing. Before he was appointed comptroller of the Pentagon, he was CEO of a company that made remote control systems for aircraft. And a lot of people, of course, are convinced that the aircraft that crashed into the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon were being controlled remotely in order to get them to do that. So, yeah, you may be right after all.
Can I make one last point here?
Sure.
It's back in, I think it was March of 2009 or April at the latest, right after Obama had taken control and moved in. One of the very first things that he did was to cut a deal with Israel, giving them the raw data of all of our intercepts on our own people.
Yes.
The raw data, meaning that and he did it basically to get their support politically and have their backing and their blessing. But it gave the Israelis the raw data to suborn any American, to steal from any American.
To blackmail any American, including CEOs, including members of Congress, including appointed officials. It was an extraordinarily stupid and reckless thing for Obama to have done, and I said so at the time, because we know how Israel conducts their foreign policy, and blackmail is a very common tool. We were reporting only yesterday on how Netanyahu was trying to bribe Bill Clinton with the Lewinsky tapes to release Jonathan Pollard.
Right. Well, that goes to show you what his mindset is, Obama's that is, on intelligence. It's something to use for his political gain, like the IRS was. Mm-hmm. It's something that he can barter and sell and trade, as you pointed out with all the economic stuff he's been bandying about. And it's simply there for his own personal and political convenience. He cares.
He's hardly alone in that. I mean, look at the way the Clintons were treating everything they had authority over as if it was their own personal property, selling it to foreign interests in exchange for donations. It's not just Obama. It is a systemic corruption. And we're now beginning to see it become visible to the general population. That's a good thing. We've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Peter. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. People are still digging through that massive WikiLeaks CIA document dump. There's just huge amounts of material there. The latest find that's now being reported, apparently the CIA has a tool that will make your Android phone bulk spy on all Wi-Fi networks around the phone. So as you wander around, your phone is busily at work mapping out Wi-Fis, looking for open ports, and spying on behalf of the CIA. And Claire, I think we just found out why the battery on your Android phone doesn't hold a charge for very long. Now then, I'd like to remind everybody about the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Now, most people, when you say Fifth Amendment, they think, oh, that's the one that says you're not compelled to give evidence against yourself, which is absolutely correct. But there's a little additional part at the bottom most people don't remember. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. All of this CIA, NSA, FBI spying is using your computer. They're tying up your disk drives. They're using your bandwidth, your compute cycles, your battery charge. They're not compensating you, are they? If you were to tally up the cost to the American consumer of all the resources and power that are being used for purposes other than that of the consumer themselves, that's a huge amount of money. We're probably talking trillions of dollars. There is nothing about this spying program that is constitutional. And if they are not in compliance with that Constitution, they are not a legal, legitimate government of this land. They're a bunch of criminals posing as a government. We need to start realizing that. Now, just out of giggles, I reposted a flashback to my article, Rivero Challenges the NSA. This was an exercise we went through a few years ago in which I wrote some systems of encryption and I dared the NSA to break them. I did the code development and encryption on an air-gapped machine, and then I carried it on over on a flash drive and I put it out on the web. And the NSA would have been well motivated to crack one of my codes in order to discourage other people from the idea of creating their own systems of encryption. Now, I'm not an encryption expert by any stretch of the imagination. And after all these years of not staying current, I'm only a moderately decent programmer. In fact, the first bit of code I wrote for this exercise, I spent more time reading the manual than actually writing code. It was a little embarrassing. But I put out 6 challenges. None were ever broken. So if I can create a code the NSA cannot break, then so can real criminals and real terrorists. It wasn't that hard to do. And that means that all this CIA, NSA spying on everybody is not to catch criminals and terrorists, but to keep watch on you, to spy on political opponents, to steal pictures of your significant other in states of undress to whack off to, and Edward Snowden said a lot of people at NSA are doing that. This NSA spying on all of you is not going to find any criminals. Have they caught any of the ransomware writers? Have they been able to bring any of the cybercrime under control? No. This is all about keeping watch on ordinary, law-abiding American peoples to make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts about how this nation is being run. And that's all it's about. Huge waste of money and facilities, and not to mention talent. Now then, article that came on out from Patriot Rising, the destroyer of worlds. And it starts out with the sentence, Trump is the destroyer of worlds. But not in the context of destroying the world that you and I and Claire live in. He is a destroyer of the existing oligarchical, corrupt establishment. And that's why the entirety of Washington, D.C. and the corporate media is going on total war against him. They see it as a matter of their survival. They don't want to give up the cocaine trade. They don't want to give up being able to lie you into wars of conquest. They love that stuff. They love that rush of power. We can make the people do any dumb thing we want them to do. They don't want to give that up. So whether you agree with Donald Trump or not, and there are some areas where I do not, we, the American people, are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with him against this corrupt establishment, or we're going to be back in the embrace of that corrupt establishment again. And they will punish us for our impertinence, for daring to stand up and ask for freedom. So, let's take a phone call. Bob in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. What's on my mind is we're not under the Constitution as far as this concerns, because this is the National Defense Authorization Act, and all they have to do is state that they're looking for bad guys. And Obama signed in the 2017. He did the Foreign Propaganda and Disinfo Act, basically. $600 billion for military. I mean, I'm afraid you must understand what's going on. Those provisions to just spy on anybody who's a perceived threat are only valid outside the borders of the United States of America, because inside the borders of the United States of America, the National Defense Authorization Act is still subordinate to the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. Get used to it. I am used to it, and how are they able to get away with it? And again, I've asked you, who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? And hey, Mike, we're going to let you go.
Okay. Bye-bye. Now let's get on to the pedophile scandal, because this one is starting to really heat up. There have been a huge number of arrests of these child sexual trafficking rings, and boy, this I certainly am in agreement with Donald Trump on. But apparently a former Congresswoman, Cynthia McKinney, who also agrees that it's time to slap these vile people down, is saying that he needs to be aware there are going to be high-level Democrats and Republicans who are caught in this. And we already know that going back to the Franklin scandal. And I absolutely do not comprehend people who engage in this sort of behavior. I do not understand the thinking of anybody elected or appointed to an office of responsibility who's going to take the risk of opening themselves up to blackmail by engaging in such behavior. Everybody who went down to Jeff Epstein's island for their little jollies with the underage girls had to know the place is going to be wired with cameras or microphones, or common sense would say it's the safe assumption to do that. But let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. I don't care who gets snared in it. Let's clean this mess up. I think Donald Trump is finally beginning to realize just how deep and smelly and stinky and slimy that swamp he's trying to drain really is. and how hard those alligators are biting at him to keep the swamp exactly the way it is right now, because it works for them. They love living in that swamp of cocaine dealing and corruption and child sexual abuse. Now, it behooves us all to keep pointing on out that the New York Slimes stepped on its own foot when they first ran the headline where Donald Trump said Obama had been spying on him. The banner headline said, "Offers no proof." But back on January 19th and 20th of this year, the New York Slimes reported that there were wiretaps of people on the Trump election team, and it was passed along to the Obama White House. One of the story's authors was Michael S. Schmidt. And that same Michael S. Schmidt wrote the story, "Trump offering no evidence, says Obama tapped his phones." So it's not just the same newspaper, it's the same reporter who on the 20th said there are wiretaps, came on out last weekend and said, there's no wiretaps, there's no proof, there's no evidence for it whatsoever. Now you know why we call them prostitutes and correspondents. And you can smell the fear out there. You can smell the panic. They've had this carefully constructed matrix for all of us to live in and believe we lived in a certain kind of world, and it's nothing like that at all. And the corporate media is in a panic. They're losing audience. They're losing ad revenues. They've already been busted for using Chinese botnets to increase the clicks on their websites to defraud their advertisers. The New York Times is having to vacate and turn into office rental space 8 floors of their own building. And it doesn't occur to them that maybe they might want to rethink what it is they are doing. Instead, they're on the warpath against anybody who challenges the lies, fraud, and deception, such as when we point out that the same New York Times reporter who last Sunday said there's no evidence for wiretaps on Donald Trump wrote a story back on January 20th saying, yes, there was. They don't want you to know that. They were all hoping you would have forgotten what the New York Slimes said back on January 20th. It doesn't happen in the age of the Internet. But they're on the warpath, as evidenced by the constant hacker attacks on my server. We still don't know what happened to RBN earlier today. The attacks on my BAM user challenge, the attacks on other servers for the independent media. You can just smell the panic. They don't know what they're going to do here. All right, let's take a phone call. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, have you heard anything about some people are charging Israel with putting a nuclear weapon in the bottom of the ocean?
Oh, come on, come on. All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. There, right there, is a good example of a shill caller who's trying to take us off focus and off topic. We're talking about corporate media propaganda. We're talking about all this stuff. And somebody calls in and says, Israel put a bomb underneath Fukushima. Yuck, 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 yuck. Good example right there. Facebook has now arrogated to itself what is branded, what is fake news and what is real, based on ABC News, factcheck.org, a known gatekeeper, the Associated Press, a known propagandist, Snopes, another known gatekeeper, and PolitiFact, a liberal source, to determine if a story is fake news. And if ABC, FactCheck, Associated Press, Snopes, and PolitiFact don't like anything you've written, you are given a banner, disputed story. Of course, looking at Facebook's numbers, they're in decline anyway, so it may be too little, too late. And there was a very enlightening article over in journalneo.org. And it starts out talking about a little-known fact of German history in the years leading up to World War II, where radio was just becoming popular. And just like the Nazis created the Volkswagen, the people's car, which was very affordable, heavily subsidized, they also had what was called the People's Radio. This was a government-subsidized radio receiver that was very affordable, and the German people bought them and put them in their home. So far, so good. The People's Radio, however, only tuned in German and Austrian radio stations. Those were the only ones marked on the dial. And between the People's Radio and jamming, the Nazis were able to decide what the German people were hearing on those radios and what they were not allowed to hear. And so this article in Journal Neo says Facebook is now trying to do exactly the same thing. They want everybody to come through Facebook, and Facebook will tell them what's real news and what's fake. It's not going to happen. There's too many alternate venues, and they're gaining. These new startup social media companies that are promising fair, balanced, no censorship, they're grabbing market share away from Facebook. But it's a good analogy, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the entire Internet-using American people to just go to a couple of gateways and trust Facebook knows what's real and what isn't, in a pig's eye, as it were. Now, here's a little footnote on this whole story about the corporate media. Apparently, an employee at the Washington Post just got his home raided in Gaithersburg, Virginia. Apparently it was raided a couple of weeks ago. The story is only breaking now, but apparently this employee at the Washington Post, he's an Israeli-born American, he's an IT engineer, has been posing as an immigration and customs enforcement officer on multiple occasions, and they found all the kit in his home. So that's the kind of people they're hiring at the corporate media. Last year, 1.7 million cable TV users canceled their subscription. Gee, I wonder why. Well, because people aren't going to pay to be lied to. If they're going to lie to us, you know, it should be free. I remember when cable TV first came on out, and we all signed up because we were going to get commercial-free TV. Now everything's on cable TV. The on-air broadcasters have pretty much shut down, and we're back to being flooded with even more commercials than we had before. Oh, my goodness. All right, turning over to the war zones. A lot of stuff going on over there. Apparently, over in Turkey, President Erdogan is on the warpath against the German government because the German government has been blocking rallies of Turkish refugees in Germany. And he's saying, this is just like the Nazis. Germany's gone back to the Nazi period. They're not allowing the Turkish refugees to have rallies to demand more rights and freedoms. And well, there's a little bit of a difference, because in Nazi Germany, the people who were being blocked, and it was wrong for them to be blocked, they were indigenous to Germany. They weren't just pouring in across the border and trying to simply co-opt the nation for their own purposes. There's a very important difference there. Meanwhile, we're seeing more U.S. forces heading into the Mideast. Apparently, the 75th Ranger Regiment has hit the ground in Syria for the Raqqa offensive. And a little reminder again that Syria has not actually granted their permission for the U.S. forces to be there. But, of course, the United States is exceptional. The United States is going to go everywhere, and we only mean the best. We're after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Actually, not really, because there's a recently declassified CIA document from 1983 saying that the U.S. agenda was to obliterate Syria, which is what they've been trying to do for the last 5 years. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're still hitting pay dirt, looking through all these records from WikiLeaks' massive dump of internal CIA hacking tools and policies, including the fact that any time there is a report that points to the CIA engaging in this kind of hacking, the CIA automatically has it classified so that law enforcement can't see what's going on. They're able to operate with impunity. For all we know, the ransomware writers are NSA and CIA. Just, you know, pumping up that end-of-the-year party fund or something. Now, do you remember that Russian ambassador who was shot dead in a galley, art gallery over there in Ankara? And the assassin was screaming, save Aleppo, and nobody was sure what was going on. The investigation has taken an unexpected turn because a 33-year-old Russian woman has been arrested in connection with this murder. Apparently, she is associated with a house of ill fame, and apparently was in communication with the assassin. So they're starting to find a link to just the line of communication that led to this assassination. And it may lead to some very surprising destinations, as it were. Over in France, things are heating up for those French elections. Fillon is just foundering between all the corruption allegations. The poll numbers are crashing on him. And apparently former French Prime Minister Alain Juppé was asked if he wanted to step into the presidential race and replace Fillon, and he said, no, I don't think I want to do that. Hollande is still out there saying that Le Pen is a danger, and his outgoing ultimate goal is to make sure that France doesn't have a president who's against the European Union. She's a threat to the New World Order. And apparently Le Pen was being interviewed by Anderson Cooper, and 60 Minutes was supposed to put the last nail in Le Pen's coffin, and Anderson Cooper just sat down there with his usual toolkit of smears and innuendo, and to her credit, Le Pen stayed calm and basically put him in his place. She ignored all the gotcha smear tactics. She came out actually looking pretty good. Now, North Korea, now you've probably been seeing all the corporate media how North Korea had another missile test, which apparently they're still testing missiles, unaware that the U.S. government was using these CIA cyber attack tools that WikiLeaks just leaked to blow up their rockets while they were being tested. So North Korea is still testing. And we're getting a report that is unsourced where North Korea has declared that this is a rehearsal to attack Japan. Nobody's actually backtracked this to anybody within the North Korean government. It's just presented as an absolute fact. You will appear. What North Korea is actually saying is these South Korea-U.S. maneuvers are what's pushing the world toward a potentially nuclear war. More about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we are... this is hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I got a little confused because of our interruption in hour number 1. We're talking about North Korea, and the corporate media is pushing the idea that North Korea is saying their current missile tests are a rehearsal to attack Japan, but nobody can actually find a site that goes, a source that goes all the way back to North Korea's government itself. It appears to be more fake news. What North Korea is actually saying, and is documented as saying, is the upcoming United States-South Korea military maneuvers are the provocation driving the world towards a potential nuclear war. Now, the United States and South Korea are getting ready for a massive 60-day supposed military exercise right alongside the borders of North Korea that is supposed to include literally hundreds of thousands of U.S. and South Korean troops, associated weapons, and now the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile System. Frankly, from North Korea's point of view, it's very hard to tell the difference between an exercise and a preparation for an actual blitzkrieg-type strike into North Korea. And I think they're justified in being concerned about that. And we know how desperate our government is to start a major war someplace to try and take our minds off the crashing economy, the revelations from the WikiLeaks CIA dump, and all the rest of the stuff that's been going on here. So North Korea may be the sacrificial lamb. We need a bloody war. I don't care who with. We just need to distract everybody from what's going on terrible in the United States. Not going to work. We've fallen for that dumb trick too many times before. Now, talking about the economic news, there is another area of concern, and it's one we've mentioned before, and it's the coming food crisis. And it's very real. We're already in a situation where there simply is not enough safe, healthy food for the world's population. Between the Deepwater Horizon accident in the Gulf of Mexico, which toxified all that seafood, Fukushima, which has contaminated seafood all over the North Pacific, now getting into the South Pacific, the problems with food additives, Like that embarrassment at Subway the last week where it turned out their chicken patties were actually half soy. There's a crisis growing here. One of the worst culprits is GMO. Not because of the potential harm caused by GMO crops, but because despite the sales pitch to the contrary, GMO crops are actually producing lower yields, less food than their natural variety. And that's a big problem. And that is the biggest threat to social stability. You have 7 days without a food supply, your nation is in anarchy. That's it. So, one possible solution, we could eat the rich. They're not radioactive, they're non-GMO, they're very, very tender, and they taste like chicken. The problem is there are not enough of them. So, down in Arizona, there's a big dust-up going on down there. Again, the corporate media isn't talking about this. But Arizona is considering a bill that would declare a parallel legal tender to the Federal Reserve note in the form of gold and silver coinage and claim checks thereof. There is no legal basis for this to be denied or blocked. It's only the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank that seeks to erase any competition to their ink and paper that they create out of thin air and loan to you at interest. But there's no law that says Americans are forced to use Federal Reserve notes. You can use any currency that you and somebody else agree to carry on commerce. Ron Paul, of course, is fully on board with this. He's down there. He's giving speeches. And this is not getting any coverage from the national corporate media for the same reason our public schools do not teach about King George III's Currency Act as a cause of the American Revolution. Don't want the smart ones to pick up and realize we've been scammed with the same system all over again. Now then, there's a new virtual currency out. They sent me some information about it. It's called Cloak Coin. It's one of many new virtual currencies that are starting to come online, parallel with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin actually outpriced gold briefly this last week. So virtual currencies are here to stay, and again, this is something the Federal Reserve absolutely hates unless they can control it and have it generate interest to them. The retail Mageddon is continuing. A third of all U.S. shopping malls are projected to close as space available signs go up all over America. We're certainly seeing it at the mall down here at the bottom, and we're hearing about all these anchor tenant retail chains are closing stores as well. We're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And it is a major problem. In fact, and we've seen this down at the bottom of the hill, shopping malls, when they lose their anchor tenants, the anchor tenants are the big stores like the Sears and Macy's and everything that are at the ends of the malls. Those are the draw. They pull people in, and then the people go down the mall looking at the specialty stores for other little goodies. But without those anchor tenants, the malls are in serious, serious trouble. And some malls, when they lose their anchor tenants, they're starting to take that space and subdivide it into more small boutique stores, in some cases, high school classrooms and doctor's offices. We actually have a lot of medical offices in our mall down here. So, it's getting ugly out there. We all remember Radio Shack. I was a huge fan of Radio Shack. I loved Radio Shack. When I was a kid, I loved building things. And yeah, I built my first crystal radio set out of a Quaker Oaks box. I think it was like 7, 8, something like that. Still have it too. Well, General Wireless Operations, which is a joint venture between Sprint Corporation and former owners of Radio Shack, is about to file for bankruptcy. It will probably result in liquidation, and apparently some of the retail outlets for both Radio Shack and Sprint are going to close as a result, and that is a real shame. Now, I don't know about Sprint and why they're in trouble. I know why we quit dealing with them. We were with Sprint Wireless, and they kept double billing us. We'd get the bill for April, we'd pay April, then we'd get another notice, you still have not paid the bill for April, and we're going to cut off your cell phone service. And I'd call in and say, I got the canceled check. Well, that doesn't matter. If we don't get another check, so we quit with Sprint. We're with AT&T right now, that we're a little more happier with. But Radio Shack, I know exactly what happened to them. They forgot what their business model originally was. Radio Shack, as the name implies, began as a line of stores for electronic hobbyists, radio enthusiasts. And I don't mean AM, FM radio. I'm talking about CB and ham and scanners and walkie-talkies and metal detectors and all that stuff, plus the parts to build your own dedicated projects. And somewhere along the line, Radio Shack said, well, we don't need those hobbyists. There aren't enough of them. We're going to broaden our appeal. And Radio Shack just started selling the exact same consumer-level products that everybody else was selling. And they didn't capture a large share of the market. They divided the market, and they got into trouble. And that's what happened. When you build a successful business model, you stick with it. Stick with what you know. Stick with what works. You get some executives with dreams of glory and grandeur, and you can get into trouble here. Now, apparently, Gordman's, that is an iconic 102-year-old retailer, they're about to file for bankruptcy. They're going to be closing 100 stores. H.H. Gregg, we've been talking about them over the last couple of weeks. They have now officially filed for their Chapter 11 bankruptcy. State Farm just posted a $7 billion with a B dollar loss in the auto insurance business. It's their biggest hit in 95 years. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Well, look at this. And again, it's a reflection that as people are unable to buy cars, they do not need to buy car insurance. We know the auto dealers and auto manufacturers are renting holding lots. They're trying to keep the factories up and running because it's not trivial to shut them down and restart them. It's not like you just turn off the lights and you come back a couple of months later and turn them on. There's a whole supply chain. There's a momentum there. So they're still building cars. They can't find anybody to buy them. If you look at the commercials on TV, wow, if you actually had money, this would be a great time to be buying a car. Little piece of advice, don't get it with the automatic parking. Don't get it with Bluetooth. Don't get it with Wi-Fi. Don't get it with a cell phone connection. Otherwise, the CIA can cause a wreck. The CIA's own files now admit that. Tremendous concern over retail commercial real estate may be the next financial implosion because all of these retailers going out of business, they're obviously, they have bought, or more often than not, they're leasing space in these malls. And as they go out of business, those spaces are going to become empty. That's probably why we had that earlier story where malls are starting to subdivide the spaces and put in smaller boutiques, allow high school classrooms, doctor's offices, and such. And they're calling it the decline of the department store model. I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. The reality is the money junkies have grabbed all the wealth up to the top of that pyramid. Under fascism, there is no means of recycling that wealth back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for workers so that they can pour that money back into the bottom of the pyramid and keep the system going. That's what's gone wrong. And along the way, retailers themselves have exacerbated the problem by abandoning the idea of a variety, which is what department stores were supposed to be about. There's a variety. You walk in, you see a wide variety, you pick what you want, you give them the money, everybody goes home happy. And now department stores, like supermarkets, the shelves are full of thousands and thousands of the exact same item that they were able to get at a bulk discount. And they're there to sell you this. We're going to sell you this. It's not what I want. Well, that's what we've got. Well, I want something different. Well, we can order it for you. Well, heck, I can order online. I don't want to order online. I want to be able to look at what I'm buying, hold it in my hand, and take it home right now. Instant gratification is a huge part of the retail shopping experience, and retail management seems to have forgotten that. or they've adopted the idea that people are so desperate for whatever they need that they'll just buy whatever we choose to sell them, whatever we get the biggest markup on. And the arrogance has obviously come back to haunt them. Now, a lot of people are looking at Snapchat's IPO, and it's turning out to be a major meltdown. And apparently they're talking about investor revolt. And apparently the investors coming on in are now accusing Snapchat of, shall we say politely, overstating its worth for the IPO. And trying to lure people in that way, and now apparently they failed to do it. The idea was huge price on the IPO. The market capitalization of Snap would be pushed so high that the major indices would include the stock, and that would make it look good and everybody would buy on in. It was a desperate, desperate gamble, and apparently it is not working. And they're talking about a spreading investor revolt against Snapchat. Now, as you know, Friday we're going to get the jobs report. It's going to be a big, huge, steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement, but there will be some change to the numbers. And the gold traders are looking at the jobs report and what's going to happen. The concern is that the jobs report may discourage Janet Yellen from her much predicted increase in the prime rate. And gold traders are saying that if the Federal Reserve raises their rates, it's going to goose gold prices. It's a very dynamic time to be in the gold market here. Now, there's a story coming out of Venice, California, and Venice is a beautiful town. Claire and I used to go down there and hit the galleries and antique stores all the time. As a matter of fact, the very, very first movie I worked on, Skate Town, USA, a lot of that was shot in Venice and around Venice. And back then it was certainly a lovely place. A lot of the bodybuilders were down there, and very artsy community. It's now starting to turn into Silicon Valley South, where a lot of the high-tech workers are now flooding into the enclave, and real estate prices are going up. Tech workers and new wealth. Unfortunately, along with that, the homeless population is rising. And they're trying to figure out what to do, because all these well-heeled new residents of Venice, California are a lot less tolerant of the homeless than all of those aging hippies. And so the question is, where are they going to go? And that is another phenomenon that, again, the corporate media isn't showing you. We're seeing the rise of tent cities again. We have an unstable economic system. Some people are doing well, but inevitably it harms others. Shouldn't work that way. Should not work that way. Now, as Marine Le Pen's poll numbers continue to climb ahead of the French elections, the euro is starting to dip down. And basically the concern is that if Marine Le Pen wins the French presidency, and look at all of the forces arraigned against her, that it could be the end of the European Union experiment, could be the end of the euro. Everybody's focused on Marine Le Pen. They seem to forget the Dutch elections are happening the 15th of this month. That could also put a Eurosceptic as leader of a nation state. This whole globalization, New World Order is starting to come apart at the seams. They're not ready to give up, unfortunately. But very clearly they've lost the initiative. Very clearly the people of planet Earth see what's going on. And there is no doubt they are in serious trouble. Down in San Diego, the Unified School District Board of Trustees has had to eliminate 1,500 jobs because tax revenues are down. If people aren't earning high wages and salaries, if they're earning low wages, they pay low taxes. And now the second largest school district in California is going to have to cut back 100,000 students. We don't know where they're going to go. I think we ought to homeschool them all. That would solve a lot of problems. Over in Philadelphia, 40% of households cannot pay their water bill. Gee, does this sound like another city we heard not too long ago? The contagion is spreading. And I am glad Donald Trump won the election. I am truly glad he won the election. But I feel sorry for him because he's inherited an economic mess that I think is beyond his ability to deal with. It's like he got promoted to be captain of the Titanic after it's hit the iceberg. You know, you, Cook, you're now the captain of the Titanic. Get it to New York, and I'm going to get in the lifeboat with everybody else. A lot of people are very concerned about the so-called smart meters, about more radio energy, is it interfering with their heads or not. Turns out there's another problem. Apparently, they're highly inaccurate. A recent study from researchers at the University of Twente and Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences found that three-phase static energy meters can exaggerate energy consumption by as much as 582%. That means 6 times. And I have heard a lot of stories here in the United States of people who get the smart meters installed and their electric bills immediately jump up. Is it just an honest engineering mistake, or is it another way to gouge the general public to keep some desperate corporation from bankruptcy just a few weeks longer? Americans giving up their citizenship at record rates. Apparently, 5,400 Americans renounced their citizenship in 2016. That's a 26% increase from those who surrendered their passports in 2015. We're coming up here on a commercial break. I know we got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get that call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Here we're going to take a phone call from Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I hope you're having a good day. I've been listening for a little bit, probably about an hour, and wow, you're on fire. You're really pointing it out. I mean, it's all falling into place, right?
Mm-hmm.
The actual dictatorship that Americans live under. And hey, you know what? A parliamentary dictatorship exists up here in Canada too, because when you're the prime minister, you're basically a dictator, and you have a majority government. Anyway, you were talking about those smart meters.
Yes.
I've been living under one for a number of years. And you mentioned someone, or a number of people that get on these smart meters, and they're mandated. They had 3-phase.
Yes.
So they're running, yeah. So basically there's something called power factor. And whenever you have anything that's a rotary, like a motor, or even a speaker, a speaker's a linear motor,
yes,
or a transformer, and we're talking about, inductance, inductive reactance, and all that jazz. The current shifts phase, so basically it's fighting itself. So you get these inefficiencies, right? And with motors, they call them power factor. So what they do is, in an industrial application, you buy this big bank, basically, of capacitors and try and shift it back. And I know this from experience because I worked at a plant where I was in maintenance and looked after this stuff. So, without this power factor correction unit, they were getting like 63% efficiency. And then after it went up to 89.
Well, the reason you have alternating current, of course, goes all the way back to Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse and Thomas Edison. If you're going to have centralized power generation, you need to get the electricity out to the ends of the distribution network. And with direct current, the losses along the line are horrendous. That's what Tesla and Westinghouse came up with. Alternating current delivers more energy over a longer distance than DC. But yes, it is constantly basically going back and forth, and in any kind of an electronic device with a coil, there's going to be a pushback on that. Now, one way that you can do that, of course, is to convert to DC with a full wave rectifier and filter, and then get the DC out at pretty much 80-90% efficiency. Interestingly enough, on movie studios, the way they do it, in order to prevent power surges from one sound stage from influencing the lighting on the others, the power into a sound stage actually goes to this big device that has an AC motor on one end and an AC generator on the other. And it basically spins the motor and the generator, which has a huge flywheel effect. So if there's a sudden change in the incoming current, you don't see it on the outgoing current. And that's how they solve that problem. Anyway, the issue here, though, is given these smart meters are programmable devices, it should be, in theory, possible to calibrate them to correctly represent the kilowatt hours that the customer is being billed for. But for these meters to be overestimating energy uses by 6 times, it sounds to me like somebody's taking advantage of the meter change to increase electric rates. And I've been hearing this again from a lot of people all over the country. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to let you go here because we're running out of time, and I got a bunch of stuff I got to talk about. Now then, we are getting another revelation from the CIA document dump from WikiLeaks, and I'm probably going to have to take this one through the next commercial break. But apparently, they have a device called Fine Dining. That's its code name. It exists on a USB device, a flash drive. And all the agent has to do is insert this USB in a target's computer, and it infects existing applications already on the system, which makes it impossible for their antivirus to find it. And apparently VLC Player Portable, Irfan View, Chrome Portable, Opera Portable, Firefox Portable, Clamwin Portable, Kaspersky TDSS Killer Portable, and I'll give you the rest of the list when we come on back. It is impressive. They have compromised the entire IT infrastructure of the world. Anyway, welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines here because we're getting way too many distractions. We're talking about the latest revelation coming out of this WikiLeaks document dump on the CIA's hacking tools and policies. And apparently, this one is they've got a device that's on a USB flash drive, and all an agent has to do is just plug it into a working computer, and it infects already in place applications that are supposedly already trusted by your security, your antivirus, and so forth and so on. And the applications that are targeted by this include McAfee Stinger Portable, Sophos Virus Removal, Thunderbird Portable, Opera Mail, Foxit Reader, LibreOffice Portable, Prezi, BabelPad, Notepad++, Skype. That may explain why we got knocked off the air earlier today. Imperius Backup, SanDisk Secure Access, U3 Software, 2048, L Breakout 2, 7-Zip Portable, and Portable Linux CMD Prompt. They have literally compromised everything in the world of online computers, office computers, cell phones, tablets, and they left us wide open for cyber criminals. And that is their mindset. It's okay to leave all of us to be victims of ransomware as long as they're assured that they can peek at us and make sure we're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts about what the government is up to. All of this, of course, illegal and unconstitutional. Getting on back to the immigration situation, Paul Joseph Watson is out there talking about new data that shows over in Sweden, where they're still insisting that there's no problem from all the refugees coming on in, apparently child sexual molestation has taken a huge upward jump in 2016. Now, Tim Pool is over there, and he actually got a couple of Swedish politicians actually on camera saying, we don't report on migrant crime, it's racist. No, it's a report on crime. It's like all these morons who email me all the time saying, well, you're against illegal immigrants because you're just being racist. Well, listen, illegal isn't a race. Rapist isn't a race. Child molester isn't a race, and that's the issue. Also in Sweden, apparently, there's been another brawl in Facha to the south of Stockholm, huge fight, during which officers found an AK-47 rifle. Gee, I wonder how that got in there. Apparently over in Germany, another refugee center had a brawl. A group of migrants smashed up their accommodation with iron bars. Their complaint was they weren't getting a good cell phone signal in the building. somebody has made a lot of really grand promises to these refugees to get them to make that trip. Promises are not being kept, and the refugees are just a little bit upset about it. Another big problem over in Great Britain, and let me preface that by going back to a comment I made here about the United States before this whole open borders nonsense. The United States was a country in which many very serious, highly contagious diseases were eradicated, such as tuberculosis. And with this new open borders, illegal immigrant refugee policy, diseases are being introduced into this country that haven't been here for decades. And because they haven't been here for decades or even longer, Americans don't necessarily have a built-up immunity to them. But apparently it's worse because London has now become the tuberculosis capital of Western Europe. It's just sweeping across the city. Like the new Black Plague. The Black Plague entered Europe in the fleas on the rats stowing away on the ships. You'd think they would have learned. The Mediterranean migrant rescues reach a 3-year high as Italy prepares for the summer influx of more refugees coming on in. They're expecting there'll be 60% more refugees this year than last year. It's just completely out of control. Now, here's a good article. This came out of Zero Hedge, France's Death Spiral. And they're not talking about France, the country. They're talking about France, the culture. And they're starting with this 1990 Gay-Sot law, which made it illegal to discriminate based on ethnicity, nation, race, or religion. And since then, it's been used to criminalize any criticism of the refugees coming on in. Writers have been fined, and politically incorrect books on the issue of immigration have been removed from the bookshops. Nazi book burning has come to France. The government is asking history books to be rewritten to include chapters on the crimes committed by the West against Muslims and on the essential contribution of Islam to humanity. Now, I will grant you, the Arabs made a lot of contributions that are not properly acknowledged. But this is not about correcting the historical record. This is about propagandizing the people of Europe to allow themselves to become part Arab nation as part of the New World Order. Now, apparently some of the other problems, Muslims are increasingly asking to be treated only by Muslim doctors, and Muslims are refusing to let their wives be treated by male doctors. And France is bending over backwards saying, oh yes, we will accommodate, we will accommodate. They've forgotten the wisdom of Teddy Roosevelt, who said, you are welcome to come here as long as you remember this is the United States of America and we have certain ways of doing things, a specific language, and a specific set of laws that you will integrate into. You don't flood into somebody else's country and then throw riots saying you have to be more like the country I'm running away from, which doesn't make any sense anyway. Now, Ben Carson has been appointed Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and he's come on out with this quote, and I'm not kidding you, this is what he said. There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less, but they too had a dream. So in Ben Carson's mind, the U.S. slaves were immigrants. There's a big difference. The immigrants are coming here of their own free will, not always with the permission of the U.S. government. The slaves didn't have a choice. They were not immigrants, they were slaves. And you need to remember from the campaign, Ben Carson was the guy who insisted the Great Pyramid of Egypt was used to store grain, which is not in the Bible. It's a plot line from the Broadway play, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I would think there'd sort of be a rule somewhere that any secretary of an administration has to wait a respectable interval of time before making his boss look like an idiot for having appointed him in the first place. But apparently Ben Carson isn't aware of that rule, or it doesn't actually exist. Something else the corporate media is not talking about is the anti-Soros revolution spreading across Europe. Because more and more countries are starting to ban Soros's Open Society Foundation as it becomes more and more obvious that it's about the destruction of sovereignty, overturning elected governments, replacing them with pro-globalist juntas. Russia's already kicked them on out. Serbia's kicking them out. Macedonia's kicked them out. Hungary's kicked them out. More and more nations every single day. George Soros' dream of a one-world government and a one-world private central bank is definitely in trouble. And at some point, you figure he's got to start running out of money. All the money he's spending to bring this about, money for Black Lives Matter and money for this leftist group and money for that leftist group. He's a very wealthy man, but his pockets aren't bottomless. Now, getting on back to Brussels, very alarming story coming out of there. The European Union is considering a plan to take control of all the member nations' nuclear weapons for a joint EU defense, including those of Great Britain, which is theoretically heading for the exit. But Brussels doesn't want the EU member nations to have control over their own nuclear weapons any longer. We'll have the keys up here in Brussels just to make sure that you all stay in line here. I think a lot of people are going to be getting very, very nervous about that one. Here's an interesting little story. Down in Miami, there was this 92-year-old gentleman, David Garrett, who calls the police. He believes somebody was taking money out of his investment accounts, and Miami police officer Johnny Fonseca went to Garrett's home and realized that this Garrett was a millionaire. He had more than $1 million in assets. Fonseca never filed a report about the visit, but he went back and he wrote a new will on behalf of David Garrett, naming he himself, Miami police officer Johnny Fonseca, sole beneficiary and executor of Garrett's estate. Garrett passed away. Garrett's family has now complained. And the Miami police are saying, well, it does have the appearance of being both unethical and immoral, and they're going to recommend allegations of misconduct and improper procedure against the officer. Meaning he's not going to be charged with felony fraud, let alone get his day in court or see the inside of a jail. Now, he's not going to get Garrett's money. Garrett's money is going to go to Garrett's original heirs. But, I mean, is this how you hold the police force accountable? When you catch them committing a crime like this on this scale, $1 million or more? We're going to say he acted improperly. It'll go in his permanent record. That'll be a bad thing. All right, getting on back to computers and all the problems of computers that are outside, the ones caused by the CIA and the NSA, or maybe I'm being naive here as well. Apparently, the Shamoon malware has re-emerged and has mutated into something nastier called Stone Drill. And apparently it sits on your victim's browser and wipes any physical or logical path accessible with the target user's privileges. And apparently this is all over Europe and spreading. And it has a backdoor module, and it's one of the new generations that exists at what's called the file level and does not require any drivers to operate, which makes it harder to find, harder to detect. Boy, there's some really good talent writing this malware. You'd almost think they'd be hired by the NSA, wouldn't you? Another article coming out from Natural News, which I guess has been reinstated to the good graces of the Google search engine. Brand name processed foods found laced with glyphosate weed killer, including Cheerios, Wheaties, and more. Now, they're putting glyphosate in there because apparently it helps the food appear to stay fresh longer, reducing loss on the shelf. But remember, the World Health Organization has declared glyphosate a probable human carcinogen. Apparently, over in Europe, they're considering not renewing the authorization for the use of glyphosate in commercial products over in Europe. They're wising up over there. Spain has launched a trial for a former priest involved in major pedophilia scandal. Apparently, he was quite prolific in his sin. He's looking at a 15-year jail term, and the initial plaintiff is demanding a compensation amounting to about $53,000. Now, getting on back to Ben Carson and all the problems with our medical industrial complex, this might explain it. Apparently, down in Australia, there was a doctor, Shyam Acharya, who had a very good practice for 11 years. He was registered with the Medical Board of New South Wales. He'd been treating patients in the state's hospitals and emergency rooms for 11 years, and he turned out to be a complete fraud. He'd stolen another doctor's credentials up in India, altered them to put his name on there, came on down, said, I'm a doctor, nobody checked up on him, and apparently for 11 years he didn't kill anybody. Of course, all he had to do was not write prescriptions. Took them 11 years to realize the guy wasn't really a doctor. Boy, that's pretty sloppy. Reminds me of that the true story behind the movie Catch Me If You Can, about this kid who was this amazing fake. He pretended to be an airline pilot. He could actually fly. He actually studied for 2 weeks and passed the bar to get his law license so he could practice law. And was a check forger, and they finally caught up with him. He went to jail, and now he's a security expert. And he works for the FBI, and he has a consulting firm, and a lot of the modern anti-forging devices on checks are his work. And I remember I was actually watching the TV show To Tell the Truth when they had him on as a guest. He's an incredible con artist, bluff artist. And, of course, when you live in a world with so much fraud going on, one more fraud just doesn't seem to call attention to itself, does it? Alrighty, I want to go on back, and I want to recap some of the stuff that we were talking about, or were going to talk about, during the break in our broadcast during our first hour. And again, it has to do with the growing realization that President Barack Obama bugged Donald Trump's presidential campaign and apparently may have provided information to the Hillary campaign to use against him. Now, the bugging began just after Donald Trump won the nomination, long before the claim that Trump and Russia were working together surfaced. The Obama administration tried to get the FBI to bug him. The FBI refused because it's right in Watergate territory. They actually went to the FISA court, and for once in a rare blue moon, even the FISA court turned them down for a warrant on Donald Trump, at which point a fake website was created to generate information that made it look like Russia and Donald Trump were swapping wet, sloppy kisses, and on the basis of this fraudulent website, they went back to the FISA court with another warrant that didn't have Donald Trump's name. The FISA court granted the warrant. The wiretapping proceeded, but included Donald Trump and his campaign staff. That's where we are right now, and they are trying to make this story go away. It's quite a shock. The Washington Post was leading the story for Watergate when Nixon was doing all this stuff, and today, possibly because they're under different ownership, they're at the forefront of trying to just say, this is all tinfoil hat, kook, nutcase, wingnut stuff here. But they want this one to go away because politics is perception, and the general perception is this is Watergate. Indeed, it's even worse than Watergate was. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and we're getting an update on the Obamagate story here. It has become a very serious problem in that it is now known that the spying on Donald Trump preceded the FISA warrant, which was obtained under fraudulent pretenses and misapplied. And now the Obama people are out there trying to say, well, there's a loophole because apparently the president is authorized under some of these NDAA, Patriot, whatever things, that he can order a wiretap on somebody for foreign intelligence purposes merely with a written order to the Attorney General. So, ta-da, we had a written order for Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and that makes it all legal and proper. Maybe, but politics is perception. Because if Loretta Lynch did sign off on this, the timing is just a little too cute with that runway meeting with Bill Clinton. And the more they try and dodge and weave, the uglier it looks. And Obama and his people, they're trying to say, well, the law this and the law that and the law that, and the people don't care about the law anymore. It's how bad it looks. It does look like Watergate all over again. Now, I'm going to recap something I said. This is a call to Rivero's Rangers. And if you do a good job on this one, I'm going to get some pins to send out to all of you. It is obvious that Obama's people, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, are trying to make this go away. They're hacking my server, they hacked the BAM user feed, they're causing all kinds of problem all over. Anybody talking about this is being attacked by the corporate media. But remember the lesson of the Downing Street memo. All of us working together can force this into the public eye. And so your mission for the next several days is that as you see these stories about how President Obama bugged the Trump campaign to help Hillary Clinton, post them to all your social media. Just flood it out there. Email all your friends. Just make it a tsunami of the truth. And they're not going to be able to stop it. It took us a month of effort to get the corporate media to finally cover the Downing Street memo. It's probably going to take a month on this one as well. But we cannot let this one drop at all. Given that the entire claim that Russia and Trump were working together was rejected by the FBI in November, there was no legal justification to continue surveillance on Trump or his people. Some of Hillary's tweets seem to indicate she was being informed of the wiretaps. That's a violation of law. So we need to work together to get that out there, as well as, to add to your workload, all these revelations from WikiLeaks CIA document dump, because the corporate media is not touching any of this. Corporate media is having to deal with Trump's allegations of being bugged by Obama because, after all, he is the president. But they don't want to touch the CIA WikiLeaks because the corporate media is in bed with the CIA. They have been since the end of World War II through Operation Mockingbird. So this is where we, the American people, are going to stand up shoulder to shoulder with President Donald Trump, and we are all going to work together to get the truth out there. And it's going to hurt a lot of people, and they're in a panic. They are desperate. They are dangerous. Be appropriately careful. But we can do it. We've done it before. And it's vitally important to the future of our country we get this truth out there. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network, I hope. So have a good evening, and aloha, America.